Chairman, would you do the roll call, please?
Tom Braxton.
Yes.
Jay Ricky. Thomas Dawson.
Here.
Monica Manjot. Harold Parikh.
Here.
Willis Simeon.
Here.
Lenore King. Here. And Jason Cannon.
Okay, opportunity to address the commission by employees or others?
If we might,
Yes, yes.
just before we, let's welcome
Oh, absolutely.
a new member on board before we.
Forgive me, moving right along. Harold Parikh is the newest member of our board. He was appointed by Loyola University. This will be his first meeting joining us. Mr. Parikh, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. My name is Harold Parikh. I'm a Native American from the tribe of Louisiana. I've been employed for the last 27 years. Chief of police for the last 22 years. I also sit on the tribal council for the last 15 years and sit on the other various groups. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome to the commission. Godspeed and good luck. We'll move on again to the opportunity to address the commission.
Yes.
Good morning. I want to welcome Mr. Parikh. Is that how you pronounce it, sir?
Yes, sir.
To the board. My name is Lucky Mead. I introduced myself. The rest of the board members know me. On several occasions, I have addressed this board with complaints, and several of the members have suggested that I put those complaints in writing. I have, in fact, put complaints in writing, and I haven't got any response. One of the complaints goes back for 3 or 4 months, and I've been told several times that my complaint wasn't falling on deaf ears. But those deaf ears haven't brought that complaint on the agenda. Mike Edmonson went to great lengths to state that the LSP Commission and LSP were separate entities, which constitutionally they're supposed to be. I haven't seen that, and I don't see that today. He says, they had nothing to do with state police. Well, this commission, if I'm correct, has a state police LaCarte card, is in a compound building of the state police, has the same server as the state police. If you're separate and apart, this commission should be and was under the Department of Administration until Mike Edmonson had it moved to DPS over here. But I think constitutionally, this commission and you as commissioners should be put under the Division of Administration, not state police. In the last year, I haven't seen that separation of state police and state police commission. I've observed less than a functional commission. We've had 5 commissioners resign in the last year. We had a director that was forced to resign last year. So the commission, for a period of time, didn't even have a quorum to show up. And it's dysfunctional. It's not serving the purpose that it was intended to serve. I also watch state troopers commit criminal acts. I'm not talking about policy and procedure violations. I'm talking about criminal acts with impunity. I guess just because they're in that thin blue line, they can commit criminal acts with impunity. And this commission does nothing about it, because I believe the state police, especially under the administration of Mike Edmonson, was kept in the dark. Because what they do, and I think they're going to do it again today, is they make the settlements, they come to the commission to be rubber stamped. The commission doesn't even get the files in the past. I've heard y'all ask for them and not get them. How can you vote on something that you don't know what it's all about? You don't, somebody might have committed murder and they're gonna, give it 90 days off in their settlement. I don't see how that can happen, and I believe as commissioners, y'all need to demand that. An example of being kept in the dark was when Mike Edmonson sat in this chair and asked to create a position for Jason Storms. The position for Jason Storms is not a constitutional position. That position should be a deputy secretary in accordance with the Louisiana State Constitution. It's a deputy secretary position. This commission created a CAO position for Jason Storms to assist the deputy secretary who doesn't exist. How can he assist somebody that doesn't exist? The governor has failed to appoint a deputy secretary to that position. The chairman of this commission, as we speak, is in violation of commission rules that he is sworn to uphold. And what has happened, he's been TDY'd, the paperwork shows from October until July to Baton Rouge. He apparently lives in the barracks, apparently has little or no other duties other than commission duties. He's been paid by the state police to do the commission work. And I think he just works on the commission rules. If I'm wrong, I'll be glad to apologize. But I have a formal complaint that I'd like to file with the commission today. And with that said, I'd like to read it in. Leon Bucky Miette, State Police Commission Director Jason Hanneman. Dear Director Hanneman, please accept this letter as a formal request for investigation into the activities described below. Our alleged Thomas J. Doss and Thurman Miller, classified members of Louisiana State Police, are temporary duty assignment to State Police Headquarters in violation of State Police Commission Rule 810E 1 and 2, which states, temporary duty assignment. When in the discretion of the appointing authority, the services of an employee are temporarily needed in a position within the same or lower class, an employee may be assigned to such temporary duty for a period not to exceed 180 days. Such assignment to temporary duty shall not affect the employee's title, status, or pay. When a temporary duty assignment exceeds 30 days, 30 calendar days, the appointing authority shall, within 5 business days after that, report such temporary duty assignment to the director in writing. The notification shall briefly describe the assigned temporary duties to be performed and the anticipated duration of the temporary assignment. I've been in attendance at these meetings since January 2016, and there has never been an item on the agenda requesting approval of temporary duty assignment in reference to T.J. Doss and Thurman Miller. I respectfully request that based upon the above allegations, the Commission conduct a complete and thorough investigation of this matter, identify the parties responsible for the alleged violation, and impose the necessary penalties in accordance with the Louisiana State Police Commission rules. And I'd like to give this to Mr. Hanneman. And I really would rather stay home and stay in bed than come here to this commission. But I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. The people of the state of Louisiana deserve better than we're getting. And the state troopers, the hard-working, honest troopers with integrity, need the protection of this commission. And when you start rubber stamping the department decisions, the grand jury does part of your job today. The department's going to interpret part of your rules today. What do y'all need it for? It needs to go back under civil service. And I thank y'all once again for listening to me, and I would appreciate an answer to my inquiry.
Is there a reason why we hadn't run any complaint filed, an investigation on Mr. Bucky's talking about, I see you come here, but I have to agree with him. I don't see anything, any respond back or anything that he's requested, whether it's true or not true. I really think we probably need to start paying attention and looking into it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but,
On other stuff that he's, on other complaints that
well,
he's.
correct me if I'm wrong, but last month, Mr. Millet, was it not you who came in here and brought to our attention the transfer of Darrell Williams? and
Yes, sir,
official
that's the
club?
first one that's been on the
That's
agenda.
number 4 on the agenda today, and
Yes.
we will address it. So it's not falling on deaf ears, it's on the agenda today.
And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
If there's anything else that you have filed as a formal complaint that has not made it to the agenda, call it to our attention, we'll deal with it.
Well, thank you. Also, under the opportunity to address the commission, I'm going to ask our testing coordinator, Ms. Helen Wise, to come forward. She's going to explain the testing process. We're not there
Yeah,
yet.
I tell you, okay.
No, I'm just still under opportunity to address.
Okay.
Okay.
Chairman Dawson.
Oh, well, it is on number 2, I'm sorry. Forgive me for overlooking that. Well, if you'll just stay there, we'll go ahead and move on to business. Number 4 on the business, forgive me, I'm sorry. Just one of those days. This is what happens when you start an hour early. For business, consideration of the March 9th, 2017 minutes. Do I have any motions?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries, the minutes are passed. Now, properly, number 2 on the agenda, State Police Promotional Exam, appearances by Dr. Helen Wise and Mr. Ronnie Jones, also I believe Dr. Jones, but, so.
Far from it.
So, thank y'all for being here today, I'll give you the floor.
Would you like to?
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ronnie Jones. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. I've got about 33 years of service in state police. And before I left the first time, I was liaison to this commission. I was on state police when the commission was created. And came back in '08. And the first project I was assigned was to develop a new testing series from our promotional exams. We've been buying exams from a group out of California. We wanted to tailor the exams to this agency and this state. And during my time I was with state police, I worked with 2 different consultants. We now have Dr. Helen Wise, who will introduce herself shortly. And I'm no longer in state police. I'm the chairman of the Gaming Control Board. I have a full-time job there, but I'm sort of the institutional advisor to Helen on testing issues. Since I have no dog in the hunt, I'm not subject to testing. I don't have to take any of the exams. I help her put the SME groups together. Welcome, Chief. Glad you're here. So that's the role that I've served, and I'm just here today to sort of answer any questions with respect to testing that Helen can address, but she's a whole lot smarter than me, so she's going to handle most of the questions.
No, thank you. I'm glad to be here today. Dr. Helen Wise from Louisiana State University in Shreveport. I'm part of the Institute for Nonprofit Administration and Research. Starting my 17th year. My background, my PhD is in applied sociology, so it really is about methodology and assessment. And also in the audience today is my...
Excuse me, Dr. Wise, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't think they can hear
Right.
you
Oh, I'm sorry.
in the back.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to put my teacher voice on?
There you go.
Okay. So I'm looking at you guys. So I'm Dr. Helen Wise. I've been at Louisiana State University in Shreveport now. This is ending my 17th year. My PhD is in applied sociology, which means that the emphasis is on assessment and program evaluation, how things function. I'd also like to call attention that my colleague, Dr. Deanne Arnold, who serves as a consultant with me on this project, is here as well, and may be able to answer some questions along the lines. So in 2009, we were contacted by the State Police Commission, and in particular, I believe Mark Oxley was the commission chairman at the time, to discuss some ways or what our thoughts might be about how to move forward with new promotional testing. At the time, there was some concern over the test that was being administered, that a great number of test questions were having to be thrown out. And as you know, if 40% of the people taking the test are missing the questions, it doesn't point to a lot of integrity within that particular assessment. Things were very obscure, things were relevant to the work that the people were doing. And so we were brought in and began a process of developing a new promotional exam that was first implemented in 2010. So today, some of the things that I wanted to go over with you were the background of this current promotional testing. How did we get to where we are? What were the steps that we've gone through over the past 6 years to arrive at this? Also, I did want to revisit the recommendations that I was asked to present to the board in December. I know there was some confusion over what it meant, and I want to be able to explain what I meant, and also to reiterate, these are simply recommendations moving forward. And then the third thing would be just to talk about some of the updates on our upcoming promotional exam. We are closing in on promotional testing. It is coming up very soon, and so I want to talk to you a little bit about that.
One quick thing that I neglected. Out of everything that you do as a commission, this is one of the most important things. The decisions that you make with respect to testing literally affect the careers of the troopers who are in the classified service. If you can't pass the exam, if you can't get on a list, if you can't achieve a certain score, you can't get promoted. That's the system. And that's a good system. You will get more calls and complaints about testing than anything else, because as many people who do well on a test, there are some who just don't test well. It's an imperfect system, but we're in a lot better shape today than we were in 08, 2010, and it improves every year. So all I would ask is that as you work through the issues of testing after hearing Helen and your deliberations in subsequent meetings, just be cautious and deliberative about how you change this process. A lot of work has gone into it. I have a lot of faith in what she does and what Deanne does, what LSUS does for us. Just be careful about making drastic changes without considering the consequences and collateral issues that evolve out of that. That's all I want to ask. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. The very first thing that we had to address is that in order to come up with a test, you have to understand what the people who work in Louisiana State Police do every day. And the very first thing that we learned is that the job descriptions had not been updated in 10 years when we started. Well, I think as everyone here knows, jobs change dramatically, and we're in a rapidly evolving, especially in terms of technology, workplace. The knowledge, skills, and abilities that people were being hired into in the early 90s are extraordinarily different than what we're hiring in today. Even over the time that we've been doing this, there have been new systems that have been implemented. And so what was happening is a lot of the testing was taking place off of those old job descriptions. And so the very first thing that we did is we undertook a 6-month-long job task analysis. And when I tell you there were somewhere between 30 and 40, I believe, it's been a long time, since 2010, there were somewhere between 30 and 40 state police who were literally asked to go in and talk about what are the things that you do every day. And so the first thing that we did is we had the SMEs, or the subject matter experts, who had agreed, and they were at every level within state police. We had them go in and they formulated what are called task statements. So, for example, a task statement might look like something, I fill out a timesheet, or I fill out a leave request, or I am responsible for filing paperwork related to accidents that I've written up. There were a lot of those. I want to say that we had somewhere around 2,000 tasks that were generated every day by people who work in the state police. And that was it was a tremendous amount of information to go through, but it was able to give us insight into the work that actually occurs, not the work that we want to occur. And so from those SME task statements, we were able to eliminate and combine a lot of those. Once we were able to eliminate and combine those, we were able to sort those into clusters, and I'll go over those with you in just a little bit.
How often are the job task analysis performed?
The last one that we did was in 2010.
Are they usually performed on a certain revolving basis or just as needed, or how does that usually
One
work?
second. Deanne, how would you answer that question?
Deanne, come on.
Yes.
I'll get out of the way.
Because I think it's been on the institution as
Okay.
well, so.
Job task analysis would be updated anytime there was material change to the job implementation. For example, a great one in this scenario is when laptops were introduced into the actual units. That would be a good time to reanalyze. As a job stays pretty stable, it'd be a waste of resources to do it more often than needed.
So is this something that's triggered by the agency? They alert you as to a new?
It would be.
Okay.
It would be. So for example, if I'm not mistaken, EIS is a new system that's been implemented, and we're going through a process right now where everyone's being trained on it in the phase 2 leadership. So even though it's been in use, they're just now being trained on it. So once they've been trained on it, that information has been disseminated. It may be a time, but it wouldn't necessarily mean that we would have to go back and do every single level. And that's part of it. I mean, none of these descriptors have been changed in 10 years.
Right.
And so it really was a time when a lot of technology was evolving and things were really changing. We found a lot of inconsistencies. You want to go ahead?
No.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm so sorry.
I'm Deanne Arnold. I am a consultant. I work with the Institute. I have a background in human resources. I actually was the director of human resources for LSP Col for several years. I worked with women on legal issues. I have my PhD in industrial organization psychology from Louisiana Tech with a focus on job analysis and testing.
Thank you. And so once that happened, we were able to go back to the SMEs and have them rate and generate what we call the KSAs. What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that need to go with each of the tasks? So imagine that we had, it was about 1900, if I'm going to be specific, job tasks. Then we were able to, had to go back and ask them, so what is the knowledge that you have? What are the skills that you have? What are the abilities that you have to be able to perform those? And then link those to what we're going to talk about with the work behavior categories in just a second. After we were able to do that, we had them go in and review it. So it was a very extensive process that involved a tremendous amount of manpower hours from the actual state police, the people who work in the state police, a lot of revisions, and then every time we took a step, one of the things that we did is we engaged those SMEs. And sometimes we would re-engage the same SMEs, and sometimes we would re-engage separate, just as an external check to the validity of the work that we were doing. Okay, so one of the things that came out of this is there were 9 general work behaviors that were identified: supervision of subordinates, administrative duties, communication internal and external, advanced supervision, policy and procedures, and then strategic planning and budget. And I have a list of each of those if anyone wants to look at it. But this becomes the content of what then we want to test on. Because what state police are telling us is this is the actual work that is being performed at each of the promotional levels. And so these are the things that we want to work on. The other thing that came out of this, I'm gonna let Deanne answer this because she put this together. Sort of the overview, and if you have it with you, you'll see there's a sliding scale in terms of the results of the job task analysis, and it was one of the major findings that really came out of this.
Well, one of the main things we found is that the state police has a very strong culture. It's very driven by order and rules and policies and procedures, and we found a very cohesive amount of work being done. What's being done in North Louisiana is very similar to South Louisiana. We did find a lot of cohesiveness. And what we found is that as troopers rise through the ranks, they spend less time policing and more time supervising. So less time on the operational features and more time supervising others who do it. So we found that to be a major skill set as they promote. They need to be able to kind of teach a man how to fish rather than go out and fish for them, right? We found that to be true. The other thing we found is that as they move through the ranks, they have to start supervising larger and larger groups, which takes a different skill set. So we found that a captain needs to know how to supervise a supervisor, right? We also found that the big change through the years is that they're interfacing more with the public and required to respond more to public complaints, inquiries from the news, that seemed to be a skill that we needed to bring through the ranks. And we found a major need for better writing skills, to be able to write memos, to write letters. And we also found that the shift that we wanted to see take place in the culture of the state police was more of an empathetic level of servant leadership. So what I mean by that is, if someone comes to work late every single day, we don't just write them up for being late. We sit down with them and say, hey, what's going on in your life? What's going on here? Why were you a star employee last year and now you're struggling? So those were the trends that we saw coming through the task analysis overall, and the things we wanted to reinforce through the testing process.
Yes, and understand that this coincided with an internal push by Louisiana State Police to implement leadership testing. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but there was an overall push within state police to formalize their own internal leadership testing. And so over the past few years, state police have been required to attend what they call relational leadership testing. And that is what we are going to refer to as phase 1. But in response to some of the job task analysis, they've also implemented phase 2, which is specific to sergeants, specific to lieutenants, and then specific to captains. Because of that increased emphasis, that's going to tie back into some of the recommendations that we've made. The other thing, the biggest change, and probably the hardest hurdle that we had to overcome was the introduction of a writing component. And as you may know, a lot of standardized testings, or a great many standardized tests, have moved to a writing component. Even in Louisiana right now, our students are getting ready to take the LEAP test, and there is going to be a writing component on there. As Deanne said, when we started looking at the job task analysis, the writing skills of some of the individuals was very important. And so it was at that point that we started to develop a rubric for how we were going to score the writing, because there's a lot of ambiguity, especially for the test taker. How am I going to be scored? If I know I have to produce a writing sample, I'm going to want to know how that's going to come about. And so we were very fortunate that Ronnie was able to help us craft those scenarios, the writing scenarios. We craft 9 scenarios every year at each level, and as Deanne said, so there's going to be an operational level focus when we get to sergeant. When it comes to lieutenant, you're really bridging that gap between learning about how to supervise and still supervising the people that are underneath you. And then as you start to move forward into captain, that is an area that we tend to emphasize things more like how do you engage with external entities on behalf of state police, but also things related to strategic planning. Because a lot of times we find that captains and above are spending a lot of time engaged in that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this except to say that Deanne and I do not create the scoring rubrics that are used for each of the individual scenarios. All 9 scenarios are brought to a team of subject matter experts, and we spend a full day with these subject matter experts. And so, for example, one of the areas that we score on is content. The subject matter experts give us the content to look for. Another area that was deemed important by the subject matter areas was not just content, but what is the tone? And as Deanne just said, there was a distinct shift within state police to move towards more of that servant leadership. And so in some cases, we have to look to the SMEs to determine, so what sort of tone should we have? We have moved away from scoring based on things like technicality, because, I mean, let's face it, we all have a Word document, we all have spell check, and we all have those kinds of things. So it really became more about the formatting of it. Was it in a proper format? Was it directed to the correct people? What was the content that was necessary? And then the tone and overall organization. Then we also use independent scorers. And one of the ways that we ensure, this was the biggest question that we had that first year, bringing it back to the troopers, is how do I know my score is a fair score? So not to get too technical, but there's a thing called inter-rater reliability. And imagine there are 4 categories for each question that we rank, and then we get an overall score.
Would you mind if I just ask
Of
one question
course.
while you went over it? And I just,
Sure.
This is for operational understanding.
Yes,
For the writing portion,
yes.
are those graded anonymously? Is there a way to protect the anonymity of who wrote it so that they're not biased by reading who wrote it? Or is it,
Yeah, I don't,
They're graded by us, we don't know.
so you don't know who wrote it? You just grade it and it's,
We have like the PO number attached to each essay
Yes.
that we get, but we don't personally know the people. Unless they've been an SME in the past, but we choose SMEs who are not eligible for promotional testing.
right.
So,
There is identifying information, but just like if you were test taker number 22752, I wouldn't know that that was TJ Doss.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I just wanted to understand if there was a gap so that there wouldn't be individual bias. So-
and when she and I are the graders, we are the two that grade every essay.
Yes, ma'am.
And we just aren't as familiar with, I mean, I guess if it was someone in my neighborhood that was on state police,
Right.
that'd be about the only way I would
Sure.
have, but I wouldn't have their name anyway assigned to the essay.
Okay, so there's no names assigned, it's just a number.
And
Okay.
then put them in a spreadsheet.
Forgive me for interrupting.
No, I mean, that is a great question, and I think it sort of speaks to it. But one of the things that we do to ensure reliability, because everybody wants to know, we get a lot of requests to have scores regraded, right? I want to have it looked at again. I talked to my friend after the test. We put the same information in there, and without putting that back, we can rescore it. But if you get the same score every single time, at some point you have to accept that that score is probably a reliable score. Can we all agree on that?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we do is at the end, we grade these independently. We then sit down and run something that says how reliable are the scores. If you scored someone a 6, did I score them a 25? And so any score that is more than 3 points difference, I have 25 points, we go through and regrade together and revisit that in order to close the gap. The thing I can tell you is at the end, we always run something called an inter-rater reliability test to see how well we're doing. So independently of one another, how close are our scores? And I believe the first year that we did this and every subsequent year, we've been at 90% or better. So the rubrics work if you use them, and it's very helpful to us to have the SMEs explain to us exactly what they are looking for within this written component. Okay, so any questions as far about sort of where we are? At the time, the way that it was explained to us, there were 3 basic questions. Are the results consistent? I'm going to skip ahead to reliability. If someone is scoring an 80 one year, a 40 the next year, and 100 the next year, that is not a reliable measure of what they are doing. So imagine that you have all A's in high school in every single subject, and then you go to take the ACT and you make a 12. I mean, which one is the more accurate view? We want all of our indicators to be aligning. So over time and then within the test, is there consistency within the score? And then validity. Are we measuring what we intend to measure? The problem with any sort of an objective test is smart people do better. And I know what you're going to say. Well, we want really smart people. Some people just aren't really good test takers, right? And that was part of the problem is in order, and also forced choice tests tend to favor males more than females. By introducing the writing component, females tend to do better on written components. They tend to be more expressive, whereas men tend to do a little bit better elsewhere with the forced choice. So we're really guarding against some of that gender bias that may have been present in some of the standardized testing before. And then differentiating. I cannot emphasize this enough, how important it was that we created a test. Everyone wants to make a 90 or above. I mean, everybody wants to make a 90 or above. That's a terrible test unless, at the cadet level, we'd be happy for that. This test has to discriminate against test takers. You have to be able to say this person was 2 points better than their next closest competitor. You have to be able to say the highest score was a 98, but the lowest score was a 48, and that there is merit in those scores. So differentiating between test takers and then ultimately differentiating between ranks. One of the things that we hope to see is if we're giving a test, a sergeant probably shouldn't be scoring as high as a lieutenant. A lieutenant shouldn't be scoring as high as a captain, okay? So let's talk about some of the results that we've seen over the past 6 years. Yes, sir. No, of course.
My ignorance here, is it the same test given to sergeants?
No, there is a core group of questions that is embedded in, there's 20 questions out of 100 that are embedded into every test. And what that is designed to do is it's designed to give us an internal check. Those 20 questions are appropriate and they're consistent across rank, but it allows us to see how do sergeants score on this, how do lieutenants score, and then we can differentiate between individual test takers. Because those same 20 are on there, let's say that we all of a sudden saw sergeants scoring much, much higher. That would have triggered an automatic problem with us. But the rest of them, when we originally generated the questions with the SMEs, they were by rank. And so captains are going to have different questions on their test than sergeants and then lieutenants. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about some of the results that we've seen. One of the most important findings, and we've looked back over the past 3 years, one of the questions that we want to be able to answer is not just who passed this test, but who gets promoted, because that's important, right? I mean, when you think about someone passing the test, you also want to know, well, did they subsequently get promoted? And so when we looked at individuals who've been promoted over the past 3 testing cycles, and we looked at captain in particular, and the reason that we looked at captain in particular is when you think about it, there's a much smaller window of scores, because in order to be a captain, you had to pass the lieutenant's test, right? At sergeant, everybody can test. Lieutenant, we get a smaller pool, and captain, we get a smaller pool. And so when we looked at the individuals who were promoted to the level of captain, those who get promoted are consistently the ones who have the highest score on the written component and on the leadership component. It does not matter what they do on other sections. They will usually pull out a very good score. And I can only give you an example. One individual who was promoted had the single highest score on leadership and the single highest written score for captain, and the first position that came open, that individual was promoted. The reason that that is important is one of the things that we wanted to do was to differentiate. So within the test, what are the sections that actually differentiate for us? And the answer is, especially at the higher levels, the sections that differentiate for us in terms of promotion are leadership and the written component.
Are the components reported separately, or is it?
Yes, the components are all reported separately, because one of the things that we want to do is we want to look at, so for example, DA is a section that is on there, and understand that these are sections that are holdovers from the previous tests, because one of the things that we didn't want to do is come in and say, okay, everybody who tests, you're going to have a completely new test, there's going to be nothing similar, no study materials that are going to be consistent. And so we've held over a lot of this material, but we report, so for example, for sergeant, we report their score on DA, their score on criminal code, and we report those separately so that we can then go back and look at and say, okay, so where's the strongest correlation? So is it people who are scoring really well on policy and procedure, or are they just knocking it out of the park when it comes time to be promoted to lieutenant? But for captain, and especially for captain, leadership and written. But we also find leadership and written is important at sergeant level. Leadership and written is important at the other. And it may very well reflect what Deanne was talking about. I mean, it's been 5 years now that Louisiana State Police has been really emphasizing this change in culture. And so it's starting to show up in the testing process and in the promotability of the individual.
Might the promoting, trying to validate the test based on promoting, might that also just be validating a bias on those who make the decisions on promotion?
If they were the ones constructing the test, I might say yes.
Well, but you're validating the test based on their decisions and promotion.
But that is simply one of them. We can also look at them and say, those are the people who score the highest on the tests as well. So those are the people who
And that's
are,
right.
right.
But to be promoted, it's a multiple hurdle system.
Yes.
We're not promoting based on test alone. They're going to have interviews, they review their records. So it's kind of, the best way I always like to look at, does it walk like a duck, talk like a duck, look like a duck? Then it's probably a duck, right? So if they can take a test and do well as a captain, they've got performance evaluations in their career that show leadership ability. They can interview and do a face-to-face question. You add all those things together, and they get promoted. So we're only one of the hurdles for promotion. So for ours to line up with that, it means that they're able to pass the other hurdles as well and be successful.
But the other hurdles don't have an objective
We would hope
component to them.
we would hope they do. I can't.
What you're assuming, I guess my point is, there's an assumption involved in validating the test in part based
Sure,
on
sure.
its consistency with promotion. That's the
And
whole point.
that was one indicator that we looked at, okay? The other thing was that we saw that scores for individuals did rise in subsequent years, but they didn't rise significantly. So there is a test, retest. People who test the first year tend to come back and test the second year, tend to do a little bit better. But what we don't tend to see are 20 and 30 point jumps. The range of scores is greater the lower the rank, and I think we talked about that. So for sergeant, you're going to have a significant amount of people who don't do as well and that are at the bottom. And then you're going to have a few people who do really well. So the basement and the ceiling, there's a much greater distance. Once we get to sergeant, that number tends to narrow. Once we get to captain, it narrows even more. We also tend to look at the median score through all ranks. We look at it for the core questions, and then we looked at it for the overall scores. And so it's rising within. And then over the past 4 years, we haven't necessarily seen a significant change in the median score. That may or may not have to do with the testers. It may or may not have to do with the content that's on there. It may also do that some people choose to opt out and hold their scores over. Okay.
I'm sorry, I read that back again. What you just explained about how the median scores have been consistent, but it may...
They've been fairly consistent. You don't necessarily have a lot of diversity in the people. So for example, people who test for captain, you're not going to have a significant difference in the number of people, A, who are testing, or B, in terms of, like, the lowest score might be a 70 and it's an 80. Somebody comes in the next time, it's a 68 and you know, it's a 92. Because of the people who are testing, we're not seeing a significant difference in terms of that median score over time. But we can't say, is it because people are maxing out, holding their score over? Is it the test takers? But the test has been consistent. Is that a fair way to characterize that? Okay. So back in December, I sent you 3 recommendations that I was asked to provide the commission, and I want to express it in this way. If we were to make changes moving forward, how could we better refine the target? And so what we've looked at, the testing, is we started out here and we had a really good idea, but every year we're trying to narrow it just a little bit better. And so the recommendations were either a graduated reduction or elimination of some of the questions in the district attorney's handbooks, the Louisiana Criminal Code, and the state police policy and procedure. I would like to clarify, I do not mean to eliminate all 3 of these sections. But it does speak back to the fact that leadership and written tend to be better predictors for us. Now, whether that's important for you or not, but they do tend to be a little bit better predictors. They also align with what state police has stated is important for them through their job task. What we've seen is the most challenges and the most complaints come from these 3 areas, and part of the reason for that is, so if you have someone who works in gaming, okay, and that person hasn't ridden in a troop car or written a ticket in years and probably will never ride in a troop car and write a ticket again, that's the content that we're testing this individual on. We don't have specific to each of the classifications. It is a general thing. Our argument would have been that at some point they did pass tests to be able to, and again, you have some other checks. Doesn't mean that we can't include those. It's just in terms of the weighting right now, more of the weight falls to DA, criminal code, and policy and procedure than others. We would recommend increasing leadership.
The question I would have for you is, I somewhat understand the DA handbook, I somewhat understand the criminal code, but policies and procedures, if they're gonna be leading these other individuals, they need to know the policies and procedures better than anybody else. And if we de-emphasize the value of that aspect of the test, we're gonna be de-emphasizing the value of people that know those things in promotions.
Okay, and I would argue the way that a forced choice test is constructed, right? Bloom's taxonomy. The first thing that we have to do is we have to know something. We have to regurgitate information. So a true-false question. When you come to a four-way stop, the person to the left is the first person who goes, right? That's it, and that is, I have no idea. True or false, I'm not a state police officer. But on a test, right, that is a potential question. What we want to do is move these up into higher order thinking, into what if you were a lieutenant and you had a sergeant who wrote a ticket related to this idea? What would be your best option? What is the first thing that you should do? What is the second thing that you should do? What is the third thing, the fourth thing?
So are you essentially saying that you're going to propose hypotheses where they have to issue spot and then pick out all of the things that are based on call-outs from the handbook, the code, policy, and procedure, and they would actually have to be identifying those as opposed to...
We want to include them as situational judgment questions, or something that maybe from, I think we talked about this before, sort of an in-basket task or an in-basket assessment. So moving.
Just to interrupt you again, I'm sorry, but
okay.
yeah, if that's what you're talking about, that's a different emphasis than saying we're de-emphasizing policy and procedure. You're just testing it in a different way, and that's fine.
And we may, but we may test it in a situational judgment way versus this, and I hate to use this term, but that regurgitation of information.
Well,
that's all we meant.
And nobody wants just regurgitation. But obviously, we would not want a test that de-emphasizes the knowledge that might be applied in a different and tested in a different way.
Sure.
And so when you say de-emphasize policy and procedure, the impression we get is that it's going to de-emphasize the knowledge that is necessary to answer the questions.
No, and in fact, with some of the written questions, that's the beauty of the written scenario, is that we are able to take those 9 work category behaviors. We're able to pull those work category behaviors out, link them over to policy and procedure. I mean, that's what we're looking for.
Okay, that's
make
fine.
sense?
Just say it that way next time. It gets our dander up when you start saying we're de-emphasizing policy and procedure.
And that was what we were saying, to emphasize more of that situational judgment kind of an assessment. Okay. All right. So any questions about those? Which would, in fact, though, because we've now gone through leadership phase 2, we're going to be incorporating those questions. So now we have leadership phase 1 and leadership phase 2. Those points have to come out of somewhere, or else we have to increase the total value of the point. Right now we have it weighted. So if we're going to increase the amount of information that are coming out of leadership, part of the other thing that we looked at is, instead of 25 points on criminal code, maybe we'll have 20 points on criminal code and move those 5 points over to leadership. But that is a question for a later time. Okay. So I gave you some information related to 1 and 3. I know that this had been a question the commission had, what do other states do? And I won't spend a lot of time on this because the hyperlinks are in the original. You can actually go and look at it. We pulled some states that are pretty open and transparent about it. I hope you would know not all states are very transparent. They don't all post bulletins. They don't all test every year. Some of them still use the California test. Some of them construct their own tests. So there's great diversity. And just so that you could get an idea, I think there's 1,500 state troopers in Louisiana, somewhere about that. So we looked at 2 states, one that was 1,100, one that was 1,800. We looked at Arkansas, we looked at Mississippi. Everyone includes written components. Some of them include more than one written component. And there's also the emphasis, sort of the recommendations that we talked about for the in-basket assessment or the oral assessment.
So is there an industry standard or a national standard that sets what happens? So each state has the.
Absolutely, and they do, and they take it very seriously. Texas underwent a statewide review of their testing procedure after allegations of corruption, for a better word, bias in their testing and things like that. And so, I believe that was in 2015. And so, they formed a task force, a commission that looked at every aspect, and they're in the process of reevaluating the way that they do it. You also have to look at it, each state, some states are incredibly rural, some states are primarily urban, you have more power in a local law enforcement than you do a state law enforcement. So this was just to give you an idea of some of the other ways that states are doing this, and 3 options that really emerged, things that we're not doing, we don't have to do, but just I thought you might want to understand sort of the best practices. Oral exams, much like the cadets go through their final stage, the oral exams, that is a very cost prohibitive and difficult process to do in a timely manner. Just want you to know that. What we call in-basket exercises. So imagine that someone walked into your office and, I've got a problem, I need you to handle it. Largely, that's what our written tests, written components of our tests are right now. We wouldn't mind seeing that expanded to some other questions, sort of like I've discussed with you before. And then lastly, assessment centers. Assessment centers are incredibly expensive to do as well. And that is where you would actually perform tasks in front of the SMEs who would score you independently. So just in addition to written components, these are 3 other ways that organizations sort of deal with that same issue. And then lastly, we have our promotional exams coming up. We are scheduled for May 16th. We have morning and afternoon sessions in Shreveport, Alexandria, and Baton Rouge. All of the tests will be administered electronically. We have a makeup exam scheduled for May 22nd for a morning session only in Baton Rouge, and we will be including Phase 2 leadership questions. Phase 2 leadership actually wraps up next week, so that for captains, so we are under a time crunch, but we will be including Phase 2 leadership questions, and then we are prepared to come and meet with the commission in July to discuss the reports. However, the tests, I'm going to defer to Christy. I want to say we usually get the letters out somewhere around the 2nd week of June. First and 2nd week of June. Okay? So any questions for us? Yes?
And I'm only speaking for myself and not speaking for the rest, but I guess what I would like to see is, and I do have a better understanding of what you were saying a little bit earlier, but I just want assurances that as we move towards these situational questions, that there are going to be situational questions that will require in-depth knowledge of the policies and procedures in order for them to address them and maybe address it in a different way, but that
Sure.
Without the knowledge, they won't be able to pass the situational test, the situational question either, because they won't know the policy.
Well, and Mr. Simeon, let me assure you, one of the things that we do, and as Ian emphasized, I mean, this really is our background, but we are not subject matter experts. And one of the things that has been so beneficial is that we have created a working relationship with Louisiana State Police for them to provide us with SMEs who are incredibly knowledgeable and can tell you, this policy and procedures no longer important. And so we do rely on the SMEs to guarantee that for us.
I guess I'm just concerned when you say that they provide you which ones aren't important. They're all important to be followed, but
I don't mean that at all, but they can certainly emphasize to us what is used on a daily basis, what is used consistently, and what is fair. One of the things that we don't want to be accused of, even though it's perfectly within our right, is to pick the most obscure rule that's on the book to do a gotcha question, right?
Nobody wants that, but,
No.
and that's not my point either.
Okay.
And our focus is really transitioning from just basic knowledge to application, and they have to have the basic knowledge to apply. So we are capturing that knowledge, but we're just trying to kind of get more into the gray area than the, do you know how to pick on a multiple choice, which policies but not.
And that's the only assurance I
Yeah.
want, and you just said it.
Okay, perfect. Do we have any other questions?
Before you step away, would anybody object if we just moved number 5 on the agenda up to a vote, or up to discussion now, while we have the creators of the test, and maybe they can answer some questions for us? Would anybody object to that, so that we can ask how this might impact us? Number 5 on the agenda is consideration of an applicant at his or her discretion may elect to extend a 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016 grade, and that grade will remain valid for promotional certificates issued after May 16, 2017. Mr. Braxton brought this to the agenda, and I just would like, Mr. Braxton, would you like to speak to it?
Well, I was just going, I want to hear what they got to say. Yeah, I didn't know we was going to get into that part of it, but I thought it was just going to be us.
I just would like to know how it would affect
Okay,
the testing, if you don't mind. If you extend the grade another year, what is your opinion of extending the grade another year as you are the grader of the test?
Well, I will only say one of the things that we just sort of highlighted is there is going to be new material that will, what? Yeah, this year there will be new material that's going to be on the test, so I don't know necessarily, I mean, then you would argue, well, what if the grades go down because the material is more difficult? We wouldn't have a consistent scoring across the way.
We've worked really hard to have this test evolve gradually. So we've only changed little things every year. If you take the 2016 test and compare it to the 2011 test, it's dramatically different. We were still testing on Scantrons at the beginning. But what we've tried to do is change it a little teeny bit every year so that scores could be carried over. That's a really big difference between 2013, I don't have it in front of me. And this year is going to be a bigger change than the previous because of the second phase of leadership training that's being conducted. So I would just give you that input as you make your decision that this year is going to probably be a little bit more of a degree of change than previous years because of the phase 2 leadership training.
I guess what I was more or less concerned about is retaining their score. I mean, they can take the test, I mean, but they lose their score. With all that we just talked about now, I don't know the truth about it. I don't know if some of the stuff that you just talked about, that Mr. Simeon just talked about, I don't know if we really there yet. My thoughts were to maybe do the old test or whatever you do, and then make it official in 2018. Give you time to work out some of the things that you're talking about doing.
But we still won't make a wholesale change. We wouldn't come in with a radically, completely, we phase it in a little bit over time. But this year is going to be a pretty significant difference because of the introduction of new content. So I just want you to be aware of that.
And just for my education, what is the current rule on how long the test is?
It depends on how much change there is between year to year, to be honest. But I will tell you, kind of a rule of thumb, in some states it's every 2 years. I don't know about you, I'm not going back and getting my GRE scores from 1997 and try to apply to school again, and I know it's not the same kind of thing, but you know, there is, as we introduce new technology, as we introduce new policies and procedures, as we introduce new systems, the content does change.
Is the rule currently that they are allowed to take only their last test score and apply that for whatever promotion they're applying for, or is it
It's their highest.
I'm sorry.
It is their highest.
Their highest
For
overall
how long?
period.
For how long back? That's what I was trying to find out.
It depends, but it's been 2 years.
The highest from the last 2 years.
My thoughts were just extend it to a year and to look into what you do. I mean, it don't affect what you're doing or anything, but it's just that they could retain that score if they take the test and they score a higher number, okay, but if they take the test and get a lower number, then they out the box. But my thoughts were they can take the test, but keep the highest, whoever got the highest score, they score a lower score, then you go back to, they keep the highest.
Right.
But if it's the highest for the last 2 years, then that knocks out 2013 through 2015, if I'm understanding that right.
Yes. And we have had some changes in terms of policy and procedure. So for example, next year, there will be a new DA's handbook. So that is definitely going to be, so that'll be another new introduction of material as well.
Other questions, discussion?
So, I'm just trying to make sure. Currently, a score prior to 2015 would not be considered?
I believe that is correct. I don't have the actual numbers in front of me, and that's usually something that's retained by the commission staff, because
It's usually
once.
in the bulletin, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's usually in the bulletin. I don't have a copy of the bulletin in front of me currently.
It should be in the bulletin that was issued, the testing date should say what was decided for this year, in terms of retention.
My motion is,
Right.
I'm voting to extend it, to keep the highest score for the next 12, if you take the test. Now, that's what I want, that's what my motion is pertaining to, not anything that they want to do.
No, I understand, but I'm just I just don't know what the current rule is
Yeah.
versus what's being proposed.
Because my concern would be talking about something that's at odds with what's already a rule for that the commission has to follow.
I don't know if there is a rule. Ronnie, could you speak to that?
I'm sorry.
I know. I don't know if there is a rule per se, but usually when there is a substantive change, will require new testing, correct?
Yes.
And so this year, because there was a substantive change with the leadership.
The leadership courses, the leadership courses are part of the requirement of prerequisites for taking the examination. You have to complete that. So there were additional questions added this year that were not on last year's examination. It's not unusual for the commission, the executive director, to permit a carryover from one year to another, but it usually doesn't go beyond 2 years. And this is sort of a leveling of the playing field. Everybody takes his exam now, and everybody's scored on the same exam. And depending on what your opinion is with respect to changing some of the course content proportionality next year, everyone may have to test again next year. So
Is that at the discretion of the executive director, or is that written down? I guess that's my question. I want to be just clear on that.
That I don't know. I do know that in the promotional announcement announcing the examinations, they're either told that they can carry the grade over or that everyone has to retest. I don't know what the commission's policy is.
Let me ask this, just because I think if we ask as direct as possible, we'll get a very simple answer. Does this test have enough substantive change, excuse me, I can't speak, that it would be only fair to retest everyone?
I agree.
Is that?
I would say yes.
That would be my appreciation from what she shared with me, yes.
Okay, so this test is different enough that it would only be fair to retest everyone this year?
One section is going to be
Yes.
different. I want to clarify, there will be a refreshing of the policy and procedure questions of the DA and the criminal code. There will be some new questions, some questions we keep every year to show trend. But the leadership materials of the phase 2 leadership is all brand new, so the leadership component of the test will be very different than last year.
And that is 25% of the score.
And the emphasis that I have picked up on is that we want this leadership training to permeate the ranks. We want it to be, we want buy-in, we
Yes.
want culture change. So that, but I really think we're gonna have to, look at what was sent on the bulletin, is that what y'all are passing around?
Yes.
And that's what we're gonna have to do for this year, because it's what's been communicated.
And if I understand that correctly, that's based on state police procedural order 229, where that's written.
should have just asked for this first, it answers my question.
Do we have any motions on number 5?
You know, I would like to see it, but I guess I could see it happen, but I guess I could see if I make that motion to do what we talk, do what I want to do. And when I get a second, I just put it that way. I'll still move to make a motion that we.
Can I ask a question? Is this, are you creating a rule? Because what I'm looking at is not a commission rule, so if we want a motion to create a commission rule, we need to promulgate it first, and then we can vote on it after 15 days. You have to have 15 days of public input on a rule, if that's what you're talking about.
Well, if that's the case, you can't do it.
You can do it, but you just can't do it today, is all I'm saying.
But you don't, this is fine, but it's good, some of these rules are used for certain deals, some of these rules, people go out the front door, so, okay, but I'm fine. I mean, it says what it says, and if you got 15 days, that's what the rules say, then let's follow up what the rules say. I withdraw my motion.
Mr. Braxton, I would recommend that we bring this back up when we come back in July, because that will be time enough to make the change for next year. So if we could reconsider this again in July after this testing cycle, I think the horse is kind of already out of the gate since the bulletin's gone out, but we could certainly bring it back up for discussion and follow the process for the next testing cycle.
So if I understand that correctly, 15 days before then, I guess the July meeting, we would have to.
We'll have plenty of time before the next bulletin is issued that we can discuss it, answer any of your questions in July, and then start the 15 days for the next commission meeting, if that's.
If you're looking to promulgate a new rule to add to this, to the rules, as it relates to testing rate.
Because the bulletin, I believe, goes out in January, and so we would have 6 months leading up to the next bulletin. I mean, I don't know if the date. I believe it goes out usually around January, we decide testing date, so we could certainly make a thoughtful consideration of it for next year.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you withdraw your motion for number 5? And
Yeah, it's not gonna work, so I gotta, it's dead on the table.
Okay.
So it's not gonna work.
Note for the record that Commissioner Braxton withdrew his motion for number 5, and we'll move on. That adjourns number 2 and 5 on the agenda. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. And we will move on to number 3 on the order of business. In the matter of Ronald Piku, matter A, oral argument by counsel related to briefs filed by both parties pursuant to interlocutory order of the appeal of Ronald Piku, docket number 16-222. B, executive session to discuss litigation, the appeal of Ronald Piku, docket number 16-22. C, consideration and ruling of the motions argued by counsel in the appeal of Ronald Piku, docket number 16-222. D, hearing in the matter of Ronald Piku, docket number 16-222. And E, executive session to discuss litigation. I'm going to turn the floor over to the executive director and our legal counsel to give us an update as the matter of Ronald Piku.
Sure. In the matter of Ronald Piku, since the time this agenda was published, we received notice of a request for a settlement and dismissal of the appeal.
I can't hear you.
We received notice as of yesterday, after this agenda was posted, that there is a potential settlement and a request for the parties involved to dismiss this appeal.
And they're probably here right now, and one of the parties.
Yes, for the parties, please come to the table.
Good morning, commission members. I'm Michelle Gerard. I'm the attorney representing the Department of Public Safety Office of State Police in this matter.
And good morning, I'm Jill Kraft representing Mr. Piku. And these chairs are way better.
I don't know if you've received a copy of the settlement agreement of the parties, but what it states is that the appellant Piku agrees to resign from his position effective to the date of termination. The department will withdraw the termination letter. All disputes between the parties are settled, and we ask that the appeal be dismissed.
And I want to speak frankly to the rationale for this. Mr. Piku dedicated his life to the tune of nearly a decade or more in law enforcement, most of which was with state police. He is a family man. He has a family. He lives in the Lake Charles area in Louisiana, and as you may or may not be aware, there's been a tremendous amount of, for lack of a better phrase, public discussion, much of which has been largely irresponsible. The decision to settle this case was not one that he reached lightly. His first and foremost consideration was for his family and his children. Secondarily, it was out of love and respect for the brothers and sisters that he served with in the Louisiana State Police. And frankly, the overwhelming consideration, I think, for him in that regard was he did not want this situation involving him to be utilized and conflated for the irresponsible personal agendas of others. The decision essentially allows him to, and did, he has resigned irrevocably, effective March 28th at 4:30 p.m. That resolves his career, unfortunately, with the Louisiana State Police. Again, not an easy decision for him. But he really wants to make the best decision moving forward, and certainly does not want this situation to be used to service the agendas of others. It also allows state police, frankly, under a new agenda and a new leadership, to move forward and allow this situation, such as it is, to be closed, the book closed, the door closed, everybody moves on. And those largely were the considerations. Again, to tell you that it was easy for him is a complete misstatement. I have spent the better part of more than a week on the phone back and forth with he, his family, and all of the folks involved in this scenario. But it is a decision he's made in the best interest of all concerned.
Motion to accept this.
Do I have a second?
I'd move that we move into executive session for a second.
Okay, we have a motion to go into executive session. Do I have a second
To discuss the litigation.
to discuss the litigation?
Yes.
Would you please say that publicly? We're going into executive session to,
The motion is to go into executive session to discuss the litigation before us.
okay, all in favor of entering executive session? Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries. We will enter executive session to discuss litigation.
I mean, I know it's here, we got an audience here, so I'd say, I suggest we read it into the record.
You may do that before the motion?
Oh, yeah, we're gonna do it before.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting back to order at this time. Ms. Christie, have you got the recorder? Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and read the settlement into the record, and then we will call for motions. In reference to the appeal of Ronald Piku, Department of Public Safety and Corrections, Office of State Police, docket number 16-222T Tango. Now before the State Police Commission through undersigned counsel comes Ronald Piku, appellant, and the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, Public Safety Services, Office of State Police, appellee, who respectfully show that they have settled all disputes involving this appeal as follows and request approval of the settlement agreement and dismissal. 1. Appellee withdraws the letter of termination dated March 29, 2016, which will be removed from his personnel file. Number 2, appellant resigns from his employment with the Louisiana State Police retroactively to the date of termination, 4:30 p.m., March 31, 2016, which resignation is accepted herein by appellee. Number 3, each party will bear their own cost and attorney fees. Number 4, all disputes between the parties are resolved by this agreement, and appellant hereby withdraws and dismisses his appeal with prejudice. And it was signed on April the 12th.
I'll make a motion to accept the resignation.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. The settlement is agreed. Approved. Okay. And we'll need each.
There's not enough lines, just.
We'll make a line. Well, they may or may not have.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. Does this agreement preclude him from accepting a position with other law enforcement agencies in the future?
I can't speak to that. You would have to speak to his representation.
And nor does this commission have authority over other law enforcement agencies.
Awesome. I mean, I'm just wondering, that could have been incorporated into the agreement, where he would agree not to accept future employment.
I think that's what Mr. Simeon is saying, that we don't have.
Sorry?
That's what Mr. Simeon is saying, that we don't have the jurisdiction to tell other law enforcement agencies what they can and cannot do.
Moving on to number 4 on the agenda, review of the transfer of Darrell Williams to Major of Technical Support Services, docket number 17-231-I, India, appearances by Mrs. Ginger Creed, DPS Human Resources Director.
Good morning. I'm Ginger Creed, Human Resources Director for the Department of Public Safety. You want me to just explain the situation, or y'all have specific questions regarding? Okay. Major Darrell Williams still occupies his position in internal affairs as major. He is currently working in another section as a TDY, which is allowable under State Police Commission Rule 8.10E, I believe, for up to 180 days, without loss of pay, rank, or status.
Does anyone have any questions?
Can
I
I
have
ask a
1
question?
second just to read this.
Let me ask a question.
We'll give them the floor as soon as the questions are done here.
I think what could be missing is actual the rule 810E, the TDY rule.
Would you mind reading 810E into the record so that the board can know?
Temporary duty assignment rule.
Mm-hmm.
8.10E1, when in discretion of the appointing authority, the services of an employee are temporarily needed in a position in the same or lower class, an employee may be assigned to such temporary duty for a period not to exceed 180 days. Such assignment to temporary duty shall not affect the employee's title, status, or pay. And then part 2 of that same rule is when a temporary duty assignment exceeds 30 calendar days, the appointing authority shall, within 5 business days after that, report such temporary duty assignment to the director in writing. Notification shall briefly describe the assigned temporary duties to be performed and the anticipated duration of the temporary assignment. It does not, this rule, as read, does not require approval from the commission or the director. It just requires notice from the appointing authority if it should exceed 30 days. And it should not last more than 180 days. And
It requires in writing to the director. Have you received a request in writing?
I believe that included my hire, so I will look and confirm that we received that.
Well, then you should have a letter in your file of that request.
And I will look in the files for that. I believe that was prior to my start.
Do we have a actual date of his transfer from Internal Affairs to his other section?
I believe,
Yeah.
I believe it was February 23rd.
February 23rd? So how many days have passed at this point? Okay, so if it has not, and you're unsure right now, we're gonna need to know if you've received that letter, or if the letter was received, and who would be responsible for that? Would it be the colonel?
The
or
superintendent, yeah, the colonel.
Okay.
And maybe that, with the changing of the colonel, I don't know if that's what happened, but I think he should be notified.
Absolutely.
Can we just table this matter to the next meeting so we can find out whether or not the notice was received or not? Because at this point, I don't know.
I would just like to make another comment on that. This is another indicator that the state police ignore this commission. You know, I filed a complaint this morning where they've ignored this commission in following the rules of the commission. And as a commissioner or commissioners, that should concern y'all.
Well, Mr. Mia, I want to find out first.
Oh, I know, I know.
I don't want to make
But
the
the
assumption.
department coming in here to tell you again, to interpret your rules for you when they haven't followed the rules, because y'all can study.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Yes, definitely I would ask that it be on the agenda for next time for you to report back to us as to whether or not there was compliance with the rule or not. I mean, but we need to know first.
And that's something we probably need to really start emphasizing on this road. We spending so many people like this testing deal. We talking about rules, and they in this paper, but they just got to start following the rules and start from the top and come down. And we as a board shouldn't have to deal with all this every time we come here. If they would just follow the rules and do what the rules say, and be it. Because my new saying gonna be at this board, what does the rules say? If the rules say this, then that's what we do. That's what I want to. I'll make a motion to delay it to the next board meeting, but that it be put on the agenda.
Okay, so he motioned the same thing. Are you gonna serve as the second, Commissioner Braxton?
Yeah, I didn't know you did that. Okay, thank you, sir.
All in favor of tabling this for further investigation until the May meeting, and it will be on the May agenda for further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries.
I got one question, like, what is the outcome if you did break the rule? What happened to you?
It appears to me that all you can do is order the superintendent to deliver the notice or deny the TDY perhaps.
Okay. But you gotta get the rule, the stuff for the agency, I said, that, okay, that helps. That's right.
In order for us to interpret.
That's right.
Okay, moving on to number 6, consideration on the motion of Louisiana Revised Statute 421119, nepotism as it relates to the appointment or appointed State Police Superintendent Kevin Reeves, whether interim or permanent. The provision shall not prohibit the continued employment of Caleb W. Reeves, a graduate of the State Police Academy Cadet Class number 95, nor shall it be construed to hinder, alter, or in any way affect normal promotional advancements in public employment, provided that such commissioned officer shall not be in the direct line of supervision of another LSP employee if they are related, pursuant to LSP Procedure Order 101, Organizational Structure, submitted by Calvin W. Braxton, Commissioner. Okay. PO 101, Organizational Structure. This is effective July 15th, 2012. Number 1, nepotism. A commissioned officer shall not be in the direct line of supervision of another LSP employee if they are related in the following fashion. A, child, sibling, spouse, parent, father, mother-in-law, son, daughter-in-law, siblings, spouse. So.
And that comes out of the state police book. So with that said and done, I just want to put that out there and say I don't see problem with the young man going to work. But just to clear up the record, I would like to put in form of a motion to adopt this, and that we that give him the authority, whoever the colonel is, or the acting colonel is. Am I right or wrong? But that be, or do we need a motion?
Well, let me ask the question.
Need a root, need a, okay.
That's the problem
Okay, here we
whether
go.
we're for it or against it.
Okay.
We need to do a rule with
Okay.
the proper 15
Unless
days
they're,
for
if they're,
public
I mean,
comment.
yeah, because what you're asking to do is create a rule that
But-
says that this won't
Right.
apply in this
Which is
situation, which is fine.
Depending on a vote, we
But-
just need to do it.
But basically, what's here is already etched in stone, and
What's
you
their
say that?
relationship? What's their relationship?
He wants, I think his son is graduating in two months.
No, he's already graduated.
Graduating, he had to be within a year. Had to be within, what, a year to,
I believe this is currently in legislation filed in the 2015 session, House Bill 308 addresses this particular situation by adding an additional item to the revised statute, 421119, where a graduate of the State Police Academy, so long as he's been employed for 4 months, I believe as it's written out, this rule shall not apply if someone, an impacted party, or their parent, or someone promotes up to Colonel, in this situation, Colonel Reeves, his son, Caleb.
There's a bill specifically for that situation.
Specifically for the situation, to amend revised statute 421119. And I believe this is also for that, for an opinion.
I see, but this doesn't relate, it's already in the state police to do that. But here's again my question. You gonna circumvent the deal for one person, or you gonna turn around? I got a brother-in-law that's a sheriff that I can't do business. But I'm saying, I'm just going down the road. I mean, I really think we need to make it a rule or whatever.
You can make a rule.
Because I think if this don't pass, then you're gonna have the same problem. So we need to make a rule.
And we can certainly promulgate a rule. We can work with you on promulgating a rule, make sure we provide.
But we can't do that now.
Can't do that.
Right,
But
but you
the legislation going forward isn't specifically for Caleb Reeves. It is for anyone that's enrolled in the State Police Academy or in the ranks of State Police Cadet. If their parent should.
But I just wanna make sure if that don't pass, you're back to the drawing board. So I think.
And then we also have the ethics opinion.
Making a rule to where we can supersede what's going on. That's my thought.
The key to it is to draft it, post it, and allow 15 days of public comment, and then at your next meeting, take it up, have discussion, and then you have a vote.
Well, could you draft that? Can you do that? Is it okay to do that for the next meeting? Just to play it safe, yeah.
And then circulate that.
Perfect.
Consideration.
So number 6, we're going to put on the May agenda, we're just gonna table,
You're gonna take responsibility of getting the rule, getting it done.
I will draft
The
verbiage
deal.
for you to consider.
Okay.
so what we're doing with number 6 is we're gonna table it until May, where we will vote on it after it's circulated for the 15 days, correct?
And promulgated publicly.
Promulgated publicly. Perfect. Okay, so moving on, number 6 will be tabled till May. Number 7, other commission business.
I've just asked that we place on the agenda for the next meeting a review of all of the complaints that have been filed by Mr. Miette to make sure that they are on the agenda. I can't make this as part of the commission business, but I would specifically request that Mr. Miette provide us in writing what he contends has not been considered by the commission that he has filed.
Please make sure that's on the agenda.
And one other thing, I talked about the test, I just want to clarify. If we will follow this test, that means if a captain takes a test, when you talk about detailing, or we're going to stop this detailing troopers to captain position or whatever, I mean, if they got to take the test, and they're supposed to take a test, the people that don't take the test should not get promoted in that position if you got a guy that's took the test and passed the test. I guess that's what I'm saying. So in my words, I guess I would like to see how many troopers that took the test and passed the test. And out of the troopers that took the test and passed the test, how many of them got promoted? And how many troopers that took the test and failed the test and got promoted? And how many troopers did not take the test and get promoted? And that goes to details. I think that's probably where our problem is just detailing a lot of troopers, and some of these troopers that pass in these tests, and the ones that not passing the tests are getting detailed in the position. So I think that might clear for us. If we could have it for the next meeting, I sure appreciate it.
That concludes the other commission business. Please ensure that those are on the agenda for May. Part 5 will be the director's report. Executive Director, I'll give the floor to you.
I'm happy to be here once again in front of you. I think this is my 9th day on the job. But I am learning ins and outs. I have a great staff, and it's been a pleasure working with you and working with my team. That being said, in accordance with the job duties outlined in Chapter 3 of the State Police Civil Service Rules, I respectfully submit the following items for the April 13th Director's Report. Number 1 on my report is the 95th Louisiana State Police Cadet Class. I would like to commend the Office of State Police and the dedicated cadets that completed their training, which culminated in the graduation on April 5th, 2017. And as we add these honorable 46 men and women to the roster of state troopers, I wish them Godspeed on their journey. The second item I have is contractual. The contract with legal services with Taylor Townsend LLC was set to expire on March 21st, 2017. Therefore, an extension request was submitted to the Division of Administration. I received contact from the Commissioner's office on March 28th that advised that they were not inclined to approve the extension request because of the appearance of a duplication of efforts for legal services, and after they conferred with the Governor's office, he agreed, and it appeared prudent given the state's budgetary situation that the extension to not be granted. As recommended by the Commissioner's office, I submitted a letter rescinding the request to further extend, which was accepted by the Commissioner's office. House Appropriations update. On March 29th, the Commission was called to the House Committee on Appropriations to discuss the fiscal year 17-18 executive budget review. The State Police Commission was the second to last agency to testify at this hearing, chaired by Representative Miguez. There were a few questions, primarily surrounding a better understanding of current contracts, as well as the previous request submitted to the committee for a deputy director position. The chairman was pleased that this commission was no longer seeking an additional full-time position, especially, again, in light of the current fiscal situation of the state. I will continue to work closely with our House Fiscal Analyst, Chaz Nichols, to be on standby for any additional questions from the House Fiscal Division and keep this commission updated. And then the last item I have is related to the monthly budget report. Commissioner Rickey and I have spoke on numerous occasions about importance of transparency with the budget of the commission. He emphasized his sincere belief that we need to live within our budget and be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, and I concur. Therefore, at our regular business meetings, I intend to present you with monthly expenditure reports in addition to the budget recap report. And as I become more familiar with the needs of the commission, I will be coming to you with items that I believe we need to pursue for the ongoing efficient day-to-day operations, as well as the long-term strategic mission of the commission. And I look forward to working with each of you in these matters, especially Commissioner Rickey, since this appears to be his passion. The numbers are there. So again, the very last item behind this report is the expenditures and the budget. And that concludes the purchase.
Any questions? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the thoroughness of the report. That brings us to the last item on the agenda, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Do I have a second? Sure. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries, meeting adjourned.